Hello, and welcome to Roseplay Presents, episode 67. As always, I'm your host, Aurian MoonRose, and today we'll be continuing for the third installment of the DWAAN Podcast. Here on Roseplay Presents, anything can happen. Instead of having a full season with 3 special episodes, every episode's a special episode. We can have interviews with content creators, game developers, podcasts, vlogs, E3 events, these closed betas, just about anything and anything can happen that's outside of gaming here on Roseplay Presents. Basically just those that can't be taken from Roseplay, Fire Moon Roseplay, Roseplay Classic, and Roseplay Versus. So, I didn't quite know what to do with these podcasts. I played the first 2 and then we went silent for a while. I finally come to the decision that I think what's best is that we do 1 per month. There's 17 episodes. They do get shorter after this one. This one's close to 2 hours. I think the rest only go to about 30 minutes to an hour. But we will do one once per month, around the 1st, on the 3rd, if worse comes to worse. However, on the 5th episode still, there will be an Adamus Review Corner, at least until we finish that up. So, if you want to talk about anything, leave it down in the comments. If you liked it, if you disliked it, if you want to see more of it, just whatever you want. If you want to talk, cool, because, that's what this podcast was about, was dealing with anxiety and negativity. But without any more delay, let's go ahead and get started with the 3rd episode of the DWAAN Podcast. And I guess, unless something comes up for Roseplay, I'll see you guys next month.
Hi everyone, this is amateurgamer, and we'll be returning to DWAAN Podcast. DWAAN stands for Dealing with Anxiety and Negativity. And as the title suggests, we are dealing with some pretty serious issues, and we're trying to make this kind of a chill atmosphere as me and 2 other members for this time, hopefully we'll get more, discuss our own lives, because we all face our own problems, and none of us are really alive, and even the most successful person who isn't here right now has her own issues, and hopefully when she comes on, we'll be able to hear from her perspective. So it's such amazing that this is our 3rd podcast. I mean, we only decided to start this podcast not that long ago, and we feel that we got some positive comments and we really appreciate it. And if you want to talk about something, feel free to leave the comments. At the end of the podcast, we'll definitely leave links and tell you how you could contact us and then basically chat. And so we want to start off this podcast discussing something about identity. And to be a bit more specific, we want to talk about how people should be true to themselves. Now, from a fairly early age, especially like when we go to school, we want to fit in, and a lot of the times we are trying to be someone else. Because if we be ourselves, it seems like we stand out, and then for some people they might get picked on and all of that. So what happens is people trying to be a person they're not, and in the end it hurts them, because first of all, the friends they make are attracted to the person they're trying, they're acting, but they're not the friends the person actually. And I mean, when I was in school, I was basically a loner. I don't have a lot of friends, and yes, it does get lonely, but I feel that it's it's not a bad thing, because it also meant that I didn't get into the wrong crowds. And for a lot of people, They probably know about, peer pressure. If you get into the wrong crowd and you start certain things, you might just regret it later down the life. And and really, like, school is uh school is something you experience early age, but later in society you'll find out that you really have to be true to yourself, because only then can you find the real friends you need. And that's one of the things about life. Yes, it's a long journey, but you don't have to do it all alone. You will need someone there from time to time. And if you have fair weather friends, those people are gonna be gone, and during your lowest point, with them gone, you'll basically tumble even, to an even darker place, and it's a vicious cycle. So, I mean, I just want to sort of introduce this, and let's see what our other two members. And sorry, I actually forgot to mention who our two members are. It's basically Aurian and Rogue from the last podcast. Sadly, the other members still couldn't make it. It's time issues in real life. But don't worry, us three will try our best to, keep this fairly interesting and trying to add new things that we haven't talked about from the last two podcasts. So on to you, Aurian. Interesting. I'm not hearing Aurian. Are you there, Aurian?
Yeah, you're kind of cutting out, actually.
Yeah, I'm hearing that too.
But I'll go ahead and start then, since you mentioned my name. Hopefully you can get your side fixed. So now we're having technical difficulties on amateur side instead of me. Yay! My mic's not screwing up any more than it normally does. So, yeah, with the identity, it's true that when you first start off in school, you start off as a loner, in my opinion, and then eventually you go into a crowd. Sometimes you tend to end up not only going into a crowd, but sometimes you start trying to mimic them and do things that you normally wouldn't do, and it changes you as a person. And really, as Amateur put it, being a loner and an outsider, I probably took that one step further. Most of the time that I went to school, I literally just stayed to myself. I really didn't care. Like, I didn't want anything really to do with people too much because I grew up kind of alone to begin with. But somehow when I got into high school, I went from both being the freak to the most popular person at the same time. How that's plausible, even to this day, I'm still very, very curious. But it ended up working like that. But with my identity, we all have different identities at home, school, work, wherever. We put on certain masks. Like, maybe we're more outgoing when we're at home, but we're more to ourselves when we're not at home. Maybe we're angry at work. We put on the mask of anger just because we don't want to deal with anybody. And that kind of comes back to my whole, well, I guess technically I have three personas at this point, since I have been introducing Adama to the show again. But I guess when I took on the Adama persona, that was more of a, I don't want to say hateful, but more of a loner to myself. Adama was supposed to turn out much more darker in the show. He was, I don't know, I don't want to say evil, but he was at least supposed to be manipulative and some stuff like that. Didn't quite turn out like that. Somehow, even then, Adama started becoming a type of hero in the storyline that was going on between seasons 2 and 3. But my Adama side was my more, I just don't care. I'm going to do this and you're not going to stop me. My Aurian persona that I use is more my, I guess, light side. You could say light side and dark side, or at least neutral for Adama at this point. So my Aurian side is kind of my fun-loving, outgoing, hey, I'm going to make fun of this while I'm doing it. And that's fine and dandy. I mean, I do have a persona outside of it, but Aurian is still me being true to myself, and that's one thing that we all need to do, is just kind of be true to ourselves. Now, unfortunately, this comes back to what I mentioned a little bit in the last podcast, was that I have issues messaging videos and whatnot. I love watching everybody's videos. Like, I watch a lot of videos, especially if you end up following me or subscribing to me. I will at that point watch your entire library most of the time. I'll binge watch it. And I've started evolving a little bit from, trying to become more outgoing and, trying to get people out there. So I've started actually private messaging my responses instead of in the comments. But even that's on a day-to-day basis for me. Like, I know I've been doing it with Rogue. I've done it with Warpath. I think I've done it with Grayson as well. I can't quite remember anybody else that I've done, but for me, it's I just can't seem to message people in their comments, like, oh, cool video, I enjoyed your video, or respond back to it. And I don't fully know what the reasoning is behind it. It really depresses me that I can't really talk to you guys as a community as much as I wish. So that puts a lot of anxiety on me as well. But so I know a lot of people are like, well, or at least I want to say I think a lot of people are like, well, you post all these videos, but you never talk to anybody. So you're just dumping your videos. And no, I'm not trying to dump my videos into anything. I do want to get that sense of community and togetherness, but it's a problem that I've been working on trying to fix, and I'm hoping it does fix itself. But like, not just that, but just like commenting, me and Rogue talked a little about it before we started the show about, he feels more comfortable with commenting on VidMe instead of YouTube because it's more of a positive community. As we're on YouTube, you like put one comment and like you have a whole race of superior people going off on you, and maybe that's part of it too. I have an issue too where I feel like every time I comment, I feel like I'm bothering somebody, or it's I feel like maybe I'm trying to throw something onto somebody unintentionally, because that's another thing we as humans feel, is that everybody has to have an ulterior motive for doing what they're doing. Oh, they're sending me a message because they want me to hopefully check out their thing, or they want me to shout out their website or something. And I think that's another thing, is just I feel too nice, but at the same time, I just don't like communicating as well as I could. And I mean, we could go into this for hours, and maybe the other two will have something to say that I'll throw back, or maybe we'll have a discussion about that in general comments and whatnot. Who knows? We never know what we're doing here, one step at a time. But I know that it is a problem that I carry, and it does depress me from time to time and give me a lot of anxiety, because my worth doesn't feel as worth as it could, because I can't shout out just to people as much as I want to. But so that's kind of my identity, or my identity crisis a little bit. So I'll go ahead and leave it there for the moment, and we'll go ahead and move on to Rogue.
Yeah, so I kind of had a different experience in high school than you, for sure. I was more isolated in high school, more kind of friendly with people in grade school. But once high school rolled around, pretty much how it worked is everybody went to, there was two different high schools that everybody went to, and I went to neither one of them. So I was essentially going into a high school all on my own, and I didn't really fit in with too many people. So I kept to myself. I was the type of kid that constantly cut classes, constantly walked out, didn't really care, did whatever the heck I felt like. Average, C's and D's, and that was about it. I didn't take too much pride in high school, or really academics in general, just because the only thing that I actually got into was sports, and because that just brought out a competitive side of me. Whereas sitting in a class listening to some teacher lecture about math or literature or whatever it might be, it's like, to me, that was boring. Now, I did take every single art class that was possible and available in my high school, because that was really what I was into. The only thing I wish I had taken and didn't take was to get into theater in my high school, and that was something I just didn't have the confidence to do, but it was something that I wanted to do. I knew, even as a small kid, I knew I wanted to be an entertainer. The problem is, for me, being a very obese kid most of my life, uh, confidence is just not something that you really have at that weight. And it wasn't until, after high school and then 2 years at college where it was kind of the same atmosphere, didn't really get to know anybody, and kind of just did my own thing. It wasn't until I started to actually work and then get to know people and then people started to break me out of my shell a little bit. I found people that, liked the same things I liked, whether it was video games or comic books or whatever it might be. And, you know, most of my life, I've always dealt with identity crisis. I kind of, I always thought myself as a Loki, uh, which a lot of people might think like from, obviously Thor, somebody who could take on multiple identities. But I always think back to the movie The Mask with Jim Carrey and taking on these different personalities. So every group that I sit there and wound up hanging out with, I wound up changing my personality, changing who I was to fit in. And I was very good at it. Very good at essentially becoming something that they would like, something that they would respect, appreciate, and want to be around constantly 100%. The problem is, because I did that, I didn't know who I truly was. So eventually what happened is, those, when you start to try to find yourself, all of a sudden, those groups that you were hanging out with before, well, now they don't want to hang out with you because now you're somebody completely, totally different than what you portrayed yourself as in those groups. So for a long while, I kind of and I still to this day, I kind of remained like more of an introvert, more isolated. But in the past, really 5 months or so, I've really gotten the ability to break out of that shell and figure out exactly who I am and go back to who I was as a kid. Because in grade school, I was able to be myself. I was able to be who I was, but all of a sudden high school rolled around and everybody was into certain groups or certain things. It's like, oh, okay, if you don't belong in those groups, then you're not going to belong in anything. So I was like, well, I'm not going to conform with anybody. But then going into the job field, I was like, well, I need to find friends. I need to find people to hang out with because it sucks being alone. And when you don't really talk with your family or feel like you can relate to your family at all either, then it's even more tough. So for me, when I started to do my show, um, and really especially now, I started to, wear mask and literally wear a mask on my show and sit there and become who I know I am. Basically, an outspoken individual says whatever on his mind, is not afraid to speak up, is not afraid to take a lead role, is not afraid to tell somebody how he feels. Is some basically if I disagree with somebody, I'm going to tell them I disagree with them. I'm somebody who I don't back down from anything. It's just who I am. And wearing a mask and putting that mask on, and I took that persona. Then when I took the mask off after my show, I still was that person. So figuring out who you are is something that's extremely difficult. And especially in today's day and age where, yeah, you feel like if you don't fit in with a certain group, you're afraid to be alone. Nobody likes to be alone. Nobody wants to be isolated. It sucks. It's not the greatest thing in the world. You want to have friends. You want to be in a relationship or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, it's that alone time that you should really figure out who you are. Because if you're with people all the time, and you're constantly trying to be just like them, you're basically being fake, then if you're not alone for just a little bit, you're never going to figure out who you are. And it's in that moment and in that time that you figure out who you are, then that you finally can start to go on the correct path in life and to figure out what you're meant to do with your life.
So yeah, that's pretty awesome, Rogue. And I want to continue on this high school discussion, and this has been on my mind for a while. Like this is entirely me, but I mean, like I said, I was pretty much a loner. I had a few friends I hang out during, like lunch and stuff. And then now that I think about it, I realized that in high school I was pretty insecure. Like I didn't have a lot of friends, and the loneliness really eat away at me. Like I'm pretty sure a lot of people, if they don't have a lot of friends, they know that feeling where they feel empty. Like they go to school but they don't look forward to it because they don't have friends they want to meet. It just feels like almost like a chore. Like going to school is basically a chore you have to do. I mean, Rogue said, I think he said he skipped some classes. I didn't, but that didn't mean I enjoyed the classes at all. At least most of the classes I got pretty bored. But what I want to say here is I was insecure and I didn't realize it at the time, but now that I think back, like there was one friend who I like to pick on. Now it's a sort of bullying, like I'm not exactly beating up my friend, but I was being kind of a bully, basically picking on him because he lets me, and now that I look back, I was probably doing it because I'm insecure, because I need some ways to show my, like I'm trying to find a way to justify why I'm alone. And somehow if I can't justify it, I take my frustrations out from a close friend. And unfortunately, we don't talk anymore, but I mean, it's because that friend went to a different high school. I don't think it's due to me. I think it's due to a certain program he wants to go into, which gives him an edge in higher education. But I mean, if I ever see him again, I would probably apologize. I mean, you know, I'm sure a lot of people, if they have been bullies, I feel like I'm a nice guy, but in certain situation where I'm insecure, where I feel alone, where I need ways to vent my frustrations, I could actually become a bully. It's not that hard. Like all you need is someone who wouldn't fight back, and suddenly you're a bully because you could take advantage of that person and you feel stronger, but really it's all a lie. And looking back, it makes me kind of sad that I was like that at the time. But it also shows you that loneliness, bitterness, all of these negativity, they could turn you into something you're not. And since we're talking about the topic of being true to yourself, you won't find who you are if you're always bitter, if you hate your life, if you hate everything around you, because for one thing, you're always trying to find someone else to blame. You're you're trying to find someone else, vent your frustrations, and in the meantime, you're not putting the focus on yourself. And too often we're not seeing who we are because sometimes we don't want to. I mean, like at the time I was a loner, I don't have much friends. I'm pretty sure at the time I don't want to find out why I don't have friends. I don't want to find out that I really stand out. Maybe I'm, have some kind of, I don't know, mental disease or whatever. Like, look, I'm not trying to make a joke on this, but at the time, I was terrified of finding out who I am because I'm worried that if I do, other people will start noticing, and it's one of those things that I experienced during high school where I'm worried that if I show who I am, I will be picked on, I will be bullied because I don't fit in. And you know, it's easy for us having come this way. I mean all of us have been out of high school for at least a couple years. And yes, it's easy for us to say be true to yourself, but really in a high school environment, I just feel it's not healthy, and it's forcing people to go into these groups to trying to fit in, to not be true to themselves. And I just feel there's a lot of work in addition to what they teach at school, but also how the environment is being handled. Because right now I feel, I don't know about you know other people's schools, but for my school I feel like, other than class, like during lunchtime, the teachers couldn't care less what happens unless you get into a fight that gets their attention. Otherwise, what happens at lunch is none of their problem. So I feel this is one of those things that schools have to address, because as long as the students are at school, the teachers should be, somewhat aware of what's happening, even if it's outside of class. Now, what are your thoughts on this, Aurian?
All right. Well, first I'd like to go a little bit more into with the whole Rogue thing. We was talking about his school experience, and then yours, of course, too. But I realized, and I forgot to mention it, was that it was especially the older kids, or my own age, around the time, whatever grade I was in, we'll go grade-wise. Whatever grade I was in and higher, I really didn't get along with anybody. I got along with the younger kids, and I don't know what it was. I'm guessing just because they were less influenced by society or by the school in general at the time. And that kind of comes back to what you were saying, Amateur, how you feel like you think it's, hard to do anything with school on that front. And I think one of the reasons why I got along with kids younger than me is that I felt they were less corrupted. And I don't mean corrupted necessarily in a bad way. I personally think that it's impossible to stay yourself fully when you're in school. And I don't mean you're still not yourself and you could maintain 99% of it. But during school and as you're going past school, I feel like you lose a piece of yourself to assimilate a piece of a new self. And it kind of comes back to that whole evolve or die thing too. I just feel that when you go to school, and it's one of the things Rogue was talking about too with his kids, or when he has kids, that he's afraid of, what could be done with the teachers. And I stated that it was the kids just as much, and it's true that the kids really do influence you, and because of that, it comes back to how you were talking about, you bullied the one friend that you did. And that's another thing, is that we all dwell on the past a lot. And I'm not going to say the past isn't a good thing. I'm going to say it is a good thing, but sometimes we dwell on it too long. Like, when we were kids, we all did stuff that we regret now or look back on and regret. I mean, this is, I'll give an example, and it's an interesting one. I must have been 4 or 5, and I still dwell on it this day. But there was, like, I was at a carnival, or not a carnival, parade, that's what it was. I was at a parade, and I ended up getting this little get a free Slurpee or slushie or whatever you want to call it for free. And I liked slushies and Slurpees, but my father did more. But for some reason I was angry that day, and I don't even know why. So before I could even get back to him, I ripped it up. Not because I wanted to not have him have a slushie. No, I just ripped it up because of whatever I was angry about. And to this day, I still think back to myself, you know what? Now that I think about it, I could have given that to my father. It's like, that sucks that I didn't remember to do that. Instead, I just thought about, but that's the thing. We all do stupid things when we're kids. Things that we're going to regret, things that we're going to look back on. And I mean, they're there to look back on. And obviously, we're going to get depressed or sad at it still, but it's just something that I think we all dwell back on. And it's not, we couldn't control what we did when we were kids. I mean, we weren't as, I don't want to say sophisticated, but we weren't as knowledgeable as we are now, or trying. Even today, we're not always fully, thinking straight. And then later on, we're like, why did I do this when I was younger? So I think it's just a learning experience that needs to go on. But see, for me, I'm very outgoing now, and I love sharing my gaming experiences with others. That's one of the other reasons why I started the content creation that I do. But And this comes back to full circle to me with the whole how I don't like to really message people first off. I like to, be given a reason why to talk to them. I love the community that I have for all my channels scattered throughout the 7-8 sites. I love what VidMe's doing. And so it's I'm very outgoing. It's just I need that push, and I'm trying to work on that. Let's see, anything else? Regret, younger, outgoing. So I mean that's pretty much it. It's just I think school does shape us and evolve us, whether for the better or for the worse. You might have a good class or good teachers, and you may not. And I definitely think that's one of the factors. And I think that we have to just remember the past, never forget it, but try our best to move on and not be as anxious about it. I mean, current stuff, like a few days, a few weeks, maybe, yeah, because they could still come back to bite us. But something like the whole, when I was a kid, I ripped up the thing and now I feel bad. I shouldn't be dwelling on it. And I don't really anymore. So I think staying true to yourself in this sense as well it's plausible, but you're going to change over time due to outside interferences. And I think just trying to know that you can maintain yourself is a big positive, but try not to fall into any type of negativity or become a bully. And I think that's where I'm going to leave that one for the moment, is I feel like I'm now rambling the same stuff again.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to go into more of the, kind of school changing who you are. For me, like, in my life, school basically didn't really change me. It had no impact on who I became at all. A lot of how my life is impacted is how I was raised by my family. Family members I had around me, my friends I had around me that were sometimes negative influences. Those were the people that ultimately kind of molded who I became today. And school, I don't know, some people might have it where, yeah, college or high school does mold who they become, but that's, I mean, how many years? High school is 4 years. You maybe go to college for 2 years to get your associates, another 2 years to get your bachelor's. In 8 years of your life, I mean, it's not going to really, I don't know how much that can actually mold you. It's when you get out in the real world, that's when your life actually starts to mold. At least that's what happened to me. I sit there and hung out with a lot of bad groups that would land me in trouble and would land me in situations that I don't really regret. I just learned from, because I think that's another thing too, is, things in life that you see as, wow, I really regret that. I really regret doing that. If you sit there and see it as something that you regret, then ultimately it's an experience that you never learn from. It's, if you look at it as a situation where, like, you know what, I regret that, but man, I really learned something from making that mistake. That's how you evolve as a person. But yeah, I mean, in terms of bullying and that, I was never the person to bully anybody. Just because it was just like, yeah, I've been bullied throughout grade school and high school. I see no point of trying to put somebody else down. I was the type of person that was always tried to stay 100% positive, no matter what it was like, going back home or dealing with my family life in general. I was always the happy person. Like, I would sit there and walk in when I was working at a Best Buy. I worked there for 2 years. Every single day I walked in with a smile on my face, and I didn't make good pay. I made, I really made about like $10 an hour, was one of the top salesmen in the store. But I walked in every single day with a smile on my face, and every day the same manager would ask, because he knew what I was going through back at home. He would sit there and say, how do you come in here every single day with a smile on your face? And I said, because why not? Like, why not be happy that, you know what, I'm living today? Who cares? Like, let's see what happens today. I just never seem to see life anymore in a negative light. I seem to only take the positives from each situation, which is why I avoid the news, which is why I avoid drama people on YouTube, which is why I avoid people like Keemstar, which is why I avoid people that just trash other people and put people down and have no real solutions to how to fix issues. All they want to do is basically ridicule and put people down. And the funny thing is, some of these people that do this and make a living off of it on YouTube, and who knows, it might happen on VidMe. I mean, this VidMe becomes more popular, you might see this sprout up. But the thing is, when you start to actually learn the history of some of these people that are trashing these other people, you find out that their life really sucks, that they grew up in a rough family, or something impacted them that made them this type of person, that made them an angry person, and they're just taking all their frustrations out on everybody, because for whatever reason cutting somebody down seems to put you up. And I know, Amateur, you were kind of saying something similar. It's just like, it makes you feel good in that moment, but then it really doesn't. So I don't know, man. Like, for me, that's really all I want to say, is that, yeah, most of me evolving as a person, none of it was in school. Absolutely none of it. Most of it was outside of school, and most of it was in retail, working jobs, and doing all that type of stuff. And my family and my friends, those are the people who evolved me and made me who I am. School did nothing for me in that department.
Now, I have to agree partly on that. Like, I felt school is too structured, and doesn't even prepare you for the real world. Like, for all the school I went to for like elementary and high school, it I probably got more out of a year out of working, on a retail or fast food, because here I meet different people. I have deadlines that actually matters. Like, I'm not sure about the rest of you, but for high school, like, my teachers were pretty lenient. Like, as long as you finish everything before they have to get the report card in. I mean, I was never late, but they were pretty lenient, and the deadlines weren't that tough to me actually. And yeah, like, going out into the real world really changes like a lot of my perspective, and it's also a contributing factor for why I got depressed, because I think part of it is because after going to school, I'm not sure about the rest of you, but when I went to when I started university, I was pretty optimistic. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do okay. Like, I won't get straight A's, but I'll get like 80 something average. Basically, finish classes in 4 years, graduate, get a job. It's that simple. And then, see, that's the other thing. Like, college and university are completely different from high school. I don't know about the rest of you, but my high school seems really easy compared to what college and university is. Like, college and university is actually a better representation of life, at least for me, where you're competing with all of these people. Like, some of these classmates will one day be, fighting with you over certain jobs. So they're gonna be your competition, and then you have to do decent. Like, if you fail, you fail, and like, it's kind of discouraging to hear that, schools here in my part of Canada, where apparently teachers couldn't even fail students. Like, basically teachers get punished for failing students even if they got nothing done. Basically, the teacher have to make sure the student do something so they just pass. And sadly, that's not how it works in real life, and that's not what happens in higher education, where if you fail, you fail. And once you fail, you have to retake the course, you have to pay the money, you have to spend more time. And I have failed courses before, which is why I'm still in school, sadly. And And basically this coupled with a lot of other things put me into depression because like I'm starting to doubt myself. I was no longer that optimistic as when I first started a university. And and something, back to what Aurian said about dwelling on the past. Sadly, when you're down and you're depressed, you have to think about the past more because, I mean, when you're in that state, you're constantly trying to find what went wrong, and most often you're looking back. You're trying to see where you made a wrong turn and what you should have done. It's This is not the best way to deal with depression, but I think most people do it. For example, let's say someone's depressed because their marriage failed, so they got a divorce and they suddenly feel depressed. That person would likely look back and try to figure out what he or she did wrong in that marriage that caused the divorce. And I feel it's just one of those things you when you're at the lowest point of your life because first of all, you're not you're not very optimistic about your future. You see your future as bleak, and if you want an analogy, basically you're in a dark tunnel. You don't see the light. You don't see any light at the end, and and instead you keep looking back, hoping maybe you could grab something from the past, from some days that were better, so that you could embrace it and maybe it could give you warmth. But one thing I found is that if I try to reach for something in the past, it doesn't warm me. Actually, it actually shocks me because I can't grab it. It's gone. It's in the past. It's history. And no matter how hard I try, those things are not coming back. And while I was too busy looking back, I wasn't looking ahead. And not only that, I wasn't walking forward. And and in a way, this is like dwelling on your past too long. You're just standing on your same spot, keep looking back and never looking to the future. But time doesn't wait for you. Time will keep flowing, and those opportunities that might be just up ahead, just waiting for you to get them, they'll be gone. And I know some people, when they're depressed, it's not a short-term thing. I mean, it could be a couple months, couple years, several years, and sadly, the time they spent, thinking about how they could have changed their past, they're missing out on all the opportunities they could have taken advantage that would have pulled them out of depression and put them on the path to maybe even their own dream. What are your thoughts on these, Aurian?
All right, so yeah, there's a lot this time that I actually have to respond to, so this might be a very long one. So I do apologize, people, for taking up a super amount of time if I do. So I want to go back to Rogue and saying that it was his parents and future experiences help shape him and mold him, and yeah, that's very true. It's going to happen. Honestly, in my personal opinion, one of the reasons why I maintained myself mostly through high school, middle school, elementary, and even into everyday life was, for me, I had amazing parents. Uh, my mother, my father, they were great, great people. I mean, albeit my mother was very overprotective, and I mean extremely overprotective, up to the point where most people would look and be like, you need to give that kid some freedom. And do I agree that I should have probably had a little bit more freedom? Yeah, probably. But I'm happy with the mother and the father I have, and their values and whatnot really help shape me and keep me the person and the way I was for later on in life. And I mean, all school did help mold me, and eventually the real world helped mold me. The problem with when I got out into the real world, it actually became more negative for me. Like, where everybody's like, well, school was a very bad time for me, and the real world, it was better, or at least more better than the schooling was. For me, it was, I had a better childhood, I personally think, than I do now. Like, there's a lot more negative, and that puts people back into their shells, or me, for instance. Like, I mean, I love socializing. I love talking to people. But most days I just want to just stay in the house or something. It kind of goes back to what Rogue was saying too about why he doesn't listen to media or anything anymore. It's not that I'm sick of it. It's just I don't want to deal with the negativity. And so I keep put up in this place and I don't leave much. But when I do enjoy myself. And I think that's something that everybody needs to do is they need to be able to enjoy life. Like either Rogue or Amateur, so I'm not really sure on this one about it, but it kind of involved the mode, it was Amateur, about always looking forward. And I do agree, you can't just dwell on the past. You've got to be able to move forward. And every day I do try that. And then I agree completely on what Rogue said about completely evolving from learning and using it to remember. I completely agree with that. I mean, yeah, we've had negative experiences, and when we dwell back on it, it's like as long as you've learned a lesson from it, it's good. So there's really not much of a need to be that negative unless you didn't learn something from it, in which case then, maybe it does need more analyzing. Your brain's trying to process that. And that'll kind of go into what Amateur said with that, too. But I'll get to that in a moment. Amateur was talking more about the high school and college aspect, as we seem to focus a lot on that, which does make sense considering Amateur is the only one out of us in college right now. So he does get a lot more stress from it. But, and again, like I usually say, I might get some slack for this one, but I'm going to try to explain this into the way that I do kind of agree with it, but I don't. At least here in the States, I don't know how it works everywhere else in the world. So maybe Amateur, being the only one of us from a different place other than the States, can comment on this more when it gets back to him. But we had a thing called No Child Left Behind, which means that we weren't going to leave a child behind, and we were going to help educate them to get them to whatnot. The problem with that, though, is that I sort of didn't believe in it at the same time I did. I agree that you should, focus on a child more if they're having problems. Try to get tutors for them or try to help them as best it could. But really what it started turning into was people would just start passing them. You couldn't fail. Failing was not an option. It was just, he's doing all right enough. Let's just pass him to the next grade. And so you didn't really learn as much as you could. And I mean, I'm one of those people who feel that you need to learn from your lessons. You need to learn from your mistakes. And leaving no child behind is a good notion if implemented correctly. And I really think that it should be implemented to where, yeah, fine, the kid isn't good at math. Don't just pass him along because you've tried for 2 years. Keep him, mold him, shape him. Try harder. I mean, I understand that obviously it takes time and money, which a lot of people don't apparently have or want to spend. But if you really are like a teacher who cares about your students' education, as we learned back in the first podcast, one of the VidMe members, Warpath, used to be a teacher. And from what I've been able to read and incorporate in my mind about it was that he really cared about his students. And I'd love for him to comment on it if he's actually watching a third podcast about kids and students and whatnot. But I think the fact that a lot of people just stop caring because they just want to get on with the day and finish it. And it comes back to earlier, too, with what Amateur said, that people tend to push things under the rug at certain points, that it's not their problem. But if you went into the teaching gig to help teach children, why are you just passing them along? Why are you setting them up to fail? But, I mean, that's just my personal feelings on this, which, later on does cause more depression issues for the kids like that, or at least in my opinion. And then finally, Amateur did mention that, if you dwell on, that you dwell on the moment, trying to find out what's wrong with your life when you are depressed, I do agree with that. But I also think that a lot of times when we're depressed, we're looking back, or at least I did, I think, we're looking back on all the negative moments rather than the positive. We're setting ourselves up to fail in a sense. It's like, oh, I did this wrong when I was this age. I did that. I am completely useless, worthless, not worth any of my time. We don't dwell on the positive. And just like we've stated with media media doesn't like to dwell on the positive too much because it doesn't sell. And so that's humans in general, I believe, is that we dwell on the past, trying to find all the negatives to justify why we are not good or depress us even more, up to the point where sometimes some people just can't handle it anymore. And I think that's something that everybody hopefully does. It wasn't just me, but yeah, when I would fail, I would look back and find all the bad moments and try to justify how bad of a person I must be. And I think it's just, I mean, I was younger too. I mean, I try not to do it anymore, but I think it's just something that we as people do in general.
Yeah, so one of the things I want to just go to like the teachers and everything. There's one thing I have a big problem with, which is teachers' tenure. I think it needs to be gone. It shouldn't exist anymore. It's absolutely ridiculous to me. There are way too many teachers. There are good teachers. I'm not gonna lie. There are great teachers, but there are also a lot of teachers who take advantage of the system. They basically know they can do whatever the heck they feel like, get away with it because they are completely 100% protected. It is basically a union to do whatever you want, say whatever you want, teach whatever you want, and it's causing a lot of horrible these kids to believe whatever you have teachers coming into the class, and some of these classes the teachers have an agenda. They're not teaching you anything, they're just teaching you what they feel and what they think. Nothing based on history, just based on personal feelings. And these teachers ultimately brainwash a lot of young kids into believing this is true, this is absolutely legit, and it's tenure that protects these teachers from not getting fired. I believe that teachers are underpaid, but I also believe, like I said, that there needs to be a system in place where there's probably a lot of good people that would want to educate kids correctly. A lot of good people who want to teach kids about history correctly, who want to teach kids how to, thrive when they get out of the school system, that teach them, hey, these are the careers that they're looking for. I mean, take a look at Google. The reason why Google has to outsource so many people is because nobody is going into the fields that Google needs people to go into. But nobody is telling these kids that, unless they sit there and go off and do their own research and understand this. But there's a lot of companies like this that everybody seems to want to go into these fields of liberal studies, and they want to go on these fields for art. And it's like, listen, I get that may be your hobby. For me, like being an entertainer, that is my life, that is my career, that's what I want to do. But I wouldn't go, I wouldn't sit there and say, oh yeah, paying $100,000 to go to USC which sounds like an amazing idea, to learn how to use a camera and film properly. No, that would be a waste of my money. And what kids are ultimately paying for is a lot of these degrees are just a piece of paper. And companies look at that as well. Companies see this as like, oh, well, you didn't go to a prestigious college, but this person over here did, so we're going to sit there and pick this person over you. Why? Clearly, I'm way more qualified. Clearly, I have better life experience, but you're going to pick him or her because they have a degree. Well, that makes no sense. And that, to me, that's a big problem, not only just in America, but just all over the place, and with these college education systems. And it really has a lot to do with how it all starts with teacher tenure. To me, once teacher tenure is completely eliminated, things can get fixed. Until it's eliminated, the problems are just going to continue. You're never going to have it be able to be fixed. What you are essentially doing is you are walling up the problems. You are essentially taking all the problems and creating bricks and walls completely surrounding them, and they will not get out until you smash those brick walls down and say, no, the problems are we're sweeping them away. That's it. They're done. And then you can start to bring in people who actually care about the kids, who actually care about educating them properly, who want to teach them how to succeed in life, who want to teach them, what they need to know to get a possible job at Google or whatever company they want to truly work for. And I mean, back in high school, I can remember there being times where it felt like, even in college, I felt like some of the teachers and the instructors were actually jealous of, kids who were in that position where they're learning and they're succeeding a little bit. They might be out doing what the teacher is teaching them. I was one of those kids who sit there and was, like I said, I was educating myself when I was going to ITT Tech. So I was actually teaching some of the teachers what to do. They're like, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, well, I'm teaching all the rest of these kids how to do it. I'm not getting paid, but I'll do it because they want to know. And it's, I found that jealousy thing kind of creeping up in there. So the other thing too is you talked about dwelling on the moment. It's sometimes it's useful to dwell on moments, and sometimes it's almost counteractive and dangerous. I'm the type of person that, because I deal with anxiety and I constantly rethink everything I do. So I sit there and do something. It may be correct, it may be a good thing, but I'm like, oh my God, maybe I shouldn't have did that. Oh, maybe shouldn't have said that. Like any little comment, like I could sit there and just say hello to, say how's it going to a girl or whatever, and immediately like, oh, should I said that a different way? Should I said something else? Like that's the anxiety that creeps up inside me. So, and I would think about these things all freaking day long to the point where it really screwed up my mind. And now I've gotten to the point where it's like, as even though I deal with anxiety still and multitude of other mental disorders, I sit there and see life as like, you know what? I said that or I did that. Well, learn from it, move on from it, and continue to proceed forward with a smile on your face and say, you know what? If I continue to think positive, then positive things are going to happen. Because if you're constantly dwelling about the negative or what ifs or what, man, I should have sit there and did this in high school, I should have did this in college, then you're just going to stay in one single isolated space and you're never going to grow as a person. You're just going to be that same person. And that's what causes a lot of depression, is when people sit there and don't evolve. And we talked, all three of us have discussed this. It's like you have to, you have to evolve in this world. But when you continue to live in the moment and continue to rethink it or the mistakes you made in the past, then what happens is the evolving process that's supposed to be in your life, as you grow older, you're supposed to evolve, all of a sudden halts. It stops. So that was just two things I just wanted to talk about in terms of teacher tenure and dwelling on the moment. So pass it over to Amateur.
Okay, I know we spend a lot of time on the school. I'll just add a last bit about school because this is something that I'm really interested in. Like even those degrees, like I'm taking engineering, and a while back I read the news. I know my two co-hosts don't. I do read it at times, and one time when I read it, I found an interesting article about how these kids who are graduating with degrees, and these degrees are like mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. So degrees you would expect to, get a decent job, like they're not finding any because they just lack the experience. And and I'm one of those who lack experience too. So this is partly why I'm doing YouTube and Twitch streams, because I'm kind of pessimistic because yes, if I work hard enough, eventually I'll get that degree, but where's the guarantee I'll have the job? Maybe 20 years ago, you get a degree, you're guaranteed a job, but right now, the job market is really complicated, especially when you have, countries trying to recruit from abroad. It really makes competition tough, and unless you stand out, like have experience, chances are like people like me are gonna have a hard time basically finding a job that could that could justify the time money they spent to get the degree and basically go from there. And returning to the topic of the past, the thing is don't dwell on it, but also don't forget about your past. Your past is what shapes you, and your past is basically what's propelling you forward. I mean, if you don't have, I mean, if not much changed in your past, then yes, you wouldn't have grown much. And sadly, in this world, if you want to, keep moving forward, you have to grow. And I know, I think it was the last podcast I was talking about why we use, the picture of a mountain and the and how, if you stop trying to climb up, you're gonna slide down and eventually you'll hit the bottom. And that's what's happening when you're dwelling on the past. You're too busy thinking and not acting. Like like even though our brains are developed to think, I find a lot of the times we also have to rely on our instincts. Like if our instincts tell us go do this, I won't have regret doing it, do it. Don't overthink things. And and just a while back, I was watching a video about why being an introvert sucks. And one of the things is overthinking things. And I also being an introvert do find myself sometimes overthinking things. And the overthinking things means that you're hesitant, and the longer you overthink things, the more likely you'll be like, yeah, maybe I can do this. And that's why I'm really thankful of the door-to-door sales. Like, yes, I might overthink things, but the moment I knock on the door and someone's gonna answer it, there's no turning back. Basically, I have to approach them, talk to them, and even if they say no, like, I had to go through, the whole thing, meeting new people and all of that. And and I find for a lot of people, they they should just go do it. Don't think about it too much. I mean, yes, do your research. Like something like school, something big like that, do it. But if there's some kind of opportunity, like for example, maybe it's your day off, and then your friend is like, oh, there's a job fair here in some place. Don't don't think about if you want to go or not. Just go. You never know what's gonna wait right there. And this kind of reminds me of a poster I saw in high school that I somehow remember, but I didn't take seriously at the time. It says that when one door closes, another door opens, and and basically that the door that opens is not gonna be right beside the door that just closed. You have to find it, but you got to be, like Rose said, you got to be positive. So you got to keep looking, and I know being positive is not easy. A lot of the time, if you're around negative people, like negativity spreads so easily, and that's also why you have to find the right groups. If you're finding a group that always brings you down, makes you negative, makes you angry, just leave, because first of all, it's not healthy for you. Second of all, when you're around those kind of people, chances are none of you are gonna really succeed in anything, because all you're doing is feeding each other negativity so that, you know, none of us, I mean, none of you will actually be, you know, none of your moods are gonna improve, and in the long run, it's really gonna hurt you. So if you're in a group that, is making you angry and all of that, just leave. There's a whole world out there. There's so many people out there. Don't be worried about not being able to find some friends. Even when you're alone, you're growing, because first of all, you're growing more independent. Because suddenly you don't have these kind of so-called friends. You have to rely on yourself. And that's not always a bad thing. And And as you slowly walk the road on your own, as you slowly grow from the experience, you'll also meet other like-minded people. Just like I wouldn't have met Aurian and Rogue if I haven't started YouTube. Like, yes, on YouTube I've been watching videos for a long time. But but I mean normally I wouldn't even leave any comments at the time. It's just kind of my style. I don't know why. But the fact that I decided to do YouTube, go on a path that I know my parents wouldn't agree with, but I'm sticking to my instinct. It's telling me that I want to do something I love and this is what I want, and I'm still gonna finish school, but considering how bleak the future looked there, I want to go after something that I would love, and even though it's gonna be hard. I'm gonna work. I'm gonna give it 120% because I want this dream to be a reality. And so I'll hand it off to Aurian.
All right, so I don't have too much to say this time, so kind of makes up for last time. But the only real topic or response back to Rogue about the tenure thing. Now, I do agree that tenure isn't necessarily the best thing at the moment. Sometimes people do abuse it, but people abuse everything. For me, though, I think tenure is an amazing thing if, again, applied correctly. I do agree that maybe it needs to be torn down from the ground up and rebuilt. But when it comes to teachers, and we all did agree on this, that there are amazing teachers out there. Not all of them are bad. I think that they need to take their time to process the information when making somebody tenure. You know, do less of the people that they only slightly worry about or ask certain questions. Do a deeper, more thorough background check, because the amazing teachers are the ones that we can't lose. And if there's a harsh time in economy and a lot of teachers have to be fired, we don't want to lose the good ones. We want to keep the good ones. We want to lose the ones that may not be in it for the right reasons or something. So I think tenure is amazing if applied correctly. And especially with how times do change and economy, like Rogue said, teachers don't get paid that much. They really don't. So when a school starts losing funding, those teachers go away. Well, I mean, mostly 10 years for college, but I'm just in a general broad space I'm using as examples. So, I mean, we need to be able to protect the good ones. And so I think tenure can be good. As for with amateur, he stated it himself that experience is needed. And I agree, experience is wonderful. It helps evolve us. Our experience, either negative or positive, as time progresses, they make us the person we are today. And am I happy about most of the decisions that I've made in my past? No. But you know what? Those past decisions help shape the person I am today, and I wouldn't trade anything for it in the past. Amateur said it, I think, perfectly, that if he could go, or maybe it was Rogue, I think it was Amateur, if I could go back in time, I wouldn't change anything. And I really wouldn't. I would not be who I am right now if one single experience, negative or positive, was changed. It helped shape me, and we've got to not, forget about it. And Rogue mentioned a little bit of that too. Help it shape you, but don't forget about it either. And I think that's completely true. We need to always remember, or try to remember, everything that has happened in our life, both negative and positive, because the negative stuff, maybe it's going to happen again. And we can use our experience from the last time and maybe do it better, or at least survive it better. And the good experiences, well, I mean, we can never have too many good experiences. So, I mean, that's really all I got to say this time.
So one of the things, because we're talking about identity, so one of the things I wanted to kind of just bring up is kind of role models, because I think who you pick as a role model in your life can also have an impact on who you become as a person. And for me, I've had a few role models, and even in like grade school, how I don't know if you guys had this whole thing where it's like, oh, who do you want to be like someday when you grow up? Like, I don't know. In grade school, they started that for me. So I had my thing was, and I did get in trouble from the teacher for this. I said the person I want to grow up to be is Hugh Hefner, and my teacher flipped out, and she said you cannot write that down. But I said I idolize this guy. I appreciate his work ethic. I appreciate what he does. You know, this is a guy that I want to be someday. And some people think, oh, that's horrible. Why would you want to be Hugh Hefner? But the same thing as I grew older, it was Hugh Hefner, then it was Howard Stern, and then Chris Farley passed away, too young of an age. But Chris Farley's comedy and just all these personalities kind of molded me into kind of the person I am today, which is basically, that whole I say whatever the heck I feel like saying. You see it in a lot of my like entertainment videos I do on VidMe. I just do what I want to do, and it's entertaining to people. It makes people laugh, and to me, that's the one thing I always wanted to do with my life. And I knew this even as a young age because I grew up in a situation where it was just nothing but negativity, and it caused a lot of depression. There was a lot of issues with, unfortunately, suicidal things going on with family members and that I don't want to get into quite yet. But it just affected me as a person, and everything was depressing. And the only thing I had to fall back on was comedy. People like Howard Stern and Hugh Hefner, and people that just like I looked at them like these are guys I want to be. Like they're constantly positive. They're living their dreams. They're sitting there always having fun. They're always having a great time. And whether or not, whatever you might think of who they are as people, to me, it's like, how can you knock? I never understood, like, sure, you can knock what they do, but can you truly knock them because of the happy? They really seem legit, 100% happy. Even Stan Lee. Stan Lee, it may be one of those people who's, obviously doesn't do the same things as Howard Stern and Hugh Hefner, but Stan Lee is a positive person as well. And Stan Lee's doing something he loves. And to me, it's those role models that can really are great to have. I brought up in the last podcast, Warren Buffett's a great role model to have. If you want to have Mark Cuban as a role model, have Mark Cuban as a role model. But there are way too many people who sit there and you hear this, and I never said this as a young age, but people would say, oh, I want to be the next Katy Perry. I want to be the next Lady Gaga. I want to be the next 2 Chainz. I want to be the next, Kendrick Lamar or J. Cole or whatever it is. It's like, you need to have real role models. I'm sorry, those are not real role models. They are recording artists. They do music. If those are your role models, that's cool. But at the end of the day, 50 years from now, nobody's going to remember who they are. They're not going to leave a mark. They're not going to do anything that's going to change the world, that's going to impact it. Honestly, Howard Stern changed the radio completely. Hugh Hefner basically completely changed the magazine industry. Obviously, Stan Lee, everybody knows Stan Lee. We've made comic books, Marvel with Jack Kirby and everything. Stan Lee did something incredible. Warren Buffett is one of the richest, if not the richest, men in the entire world. These are people who actually left an impact. Steve Jobs left an impact. Mark Zuckerberg. These are people that you should have as your role models. And I always believe that whoever you decide your role model is does have kind of an effect on who you want to be as a person and who you ultimately grow up to be. Because if you're copying what they're doing, then at the end of the day, if you're copying and trying to role model somebody who's very negative, somebody who does get in a lot of trouble, then you're probably going to do the same thing because that's somebody you worship, that's somebody you idolize. But if you idolize somebody who does work hard and sits there and does impact the world, then you're probably gonna, lean towards that direction of doing the same thing. But I would just, I'll pass it to Amateur, and just, if you want to, go off of that and the role model thing, then go right ahead.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting. I don't think I ever had a role model. I think it's partly due to my upbringing because, like I said in the last two podcasts, I'm sure I mentioned in both of them. My parents were immigrants and they brought me over when I was 5. So so there was a really awkward like there was an awkward interaction between what kind of culture I grew up on because my my parents, stick with the culture we have back in China, and I grew up here in Canada. So like at school, it's all Canadian. So with everything mixing, I guess I never really found out what my identity, and that's a pretty big a factor because I think that's why I was so lost. I felt that since a very young age, I was trying to, find out who I am, and it's really tough when you don't know who you are. I mean, I agree with Rogue. Having a role model is absolutely vital because it. I mean, who your role model is kind of give you a good idea of who you want to be. And having bad role models, yes, you're gonna walk down a path you might regret later, and having a good one will have the opposite effect. And see, that's the thing. When you don't have role models, and you're sort of in this situation where your family's culture and the culture you grew up in clashes, it's like finding the identity. I know we're going back to identity a lot, but it's definitely something that you have to find for yourself. And I even think some people who grew up in like other places, like like even people who are raised in Canada or in the States, they still need to find their own identity because even though you're born and yeah, you have your parents and all of that influencing you, you're still gonna be pretty, you know, you're still on this path. I mean, life is a long journey where you're learning who you are, trying to unlock the potential you have within you. And it's never easy, and it takes a lot of soul searching. And sometimes, yes, you do have to look back in the past, but you also have to walk forward at the same time because, like I said, opportunities just don't wait for you. And now just hand it off to Aurian. I know I this was kind of brief, but uh,
Yeah, no, and I've got to agree that mine's sort of brief too. I mean, I think we've kind of hit a wall on our topics for the most part for today, honestly. So I think that's why we're starting to get shorter and shorter. But I do have a little bit to say. First, I've got to agree that I love Stan Lee. I'm a definitely comic book nerd, and you're right. He does what he loves, and that's something that we all need to do. Actually, I might have more to say just because of this. The job that you get, the job you have, you should love it. I was always told by one of my business teachers that if you don't love your job, you shouldn't stay in it. Should you do it? Probably for the time being, especially if you have no other income, no other way to survive. Obviously, you need to continue, but you need to look for something you love. If you love what you do, you'll love your job will love you. Without it, it doesn't work. And Stan Lee's a prime, well, okay, probably Hugh Hefner too is a prime example, but he did try to change the Playboy aspect for a bit by having the no nudity, and now I hear it is going back. But I'll stick with Stan Lee just because I do love him more. Stan Lee definitely loves what he does. I mean, we don't know what he's like in his personal life for sure, but whenever the cameras are on him, it's Excelsior this or just really high energetic, lot of energy, and he loves to be in all the Marvel movies, or maybe at this point he's demanded to be in it. You created this, but then what happens with the ones that he didn't create? You're still going to be in this. Well, why? Because we just want you to be. Fans will love the cameo. So I mean, yeah, I love Stan Lee, and I love the fact that he loves what he does, and I think that's a big increase from your anxiety or your depression. If you're working in a job you don't like, you're going to be more depressed. You're going to have more anxiety. But I mean, there's not much to say on that part. And technically, this next part's more for amateur and rogue. Rogue definitely stated what role models he enjoyed. Amateur kind of really didn't know for sure if he really had any or whatnot. For me, my role models didn't exist. And what I mean by that, and again, comes back to, oh God, Aurian, you're getting ready to go into games again, aren't you? Quit it. Quit it. Bad Aurian. But yes, most of my role models came from video games. I mean, Final Fantasies especially. Maybe a little too much on 8 with the whole emo thing, but we won't get into that one. But characters in general, like, I loved playing any game that had a deep story. Story was always my favorite. And the fact that, you know, you had this high role model that you're looking up to while you're playing, and it's longer than a movie, it's longer than a TV show, hopefully. Otherwise, why is it even a game at that point if it's only less than 30-minute game? Unless maybe a cell phone game. Those, okay, seem to be more popular. But most of my role models were video game characters. And I really enjoyed being the hero. And I think those were my role models to help me grow up as I don't want to say spectacular, because I'm far from spectacular. But they definitely helped me grow up, along with my parents. Like I said, my parents were definitely a big influence, and I love them to death and all that they did for me, including getting me into gaming, which I do know every once in a while they're like, maybe we shouldn't have got you into this. And I'm always back with, yeah, maybe you shouldn't have. Maybe I wouldn't spend 40 hours a day on it. There's only 24, Aurian. Don't care. But so, yeah, now I'm joking a little bit here and there, because this one, we're kind of on a positive topic, so I feel just a little bit more jokative, too. But, I mean, yeah, I mean, everybody has their own role models, and, I mean, I do agree with what both people said, is that it should be a positive, healthy one. And, yeah, it's interesting that your teacher didn't want you to have Hugh Hefner as a role model. Now, I can definitely understand why. I think all of us can probably understand why. But you know what? Hugh Hefner is another person who does what he loves. Or does who he loves. You know, something around there.
Well, he was an artist.
Yeah, he's an artist. And that's the thing, is that he really did love what he did and does. And, you know, you see him more positive than you do negative. And albeit, you know, maybe if you were younger back then as a kid, you could have been like, well, it's not for everything that he does. It's because he's a positive person. He does all these, you know, he's always, you know, not depressed and so on and so forth. And you probably still, or they probably still would have said no. But you know what? At least you would have had a good logical thought behind it. And I do agree. Hugh Hefner could be a great role model, at least for positivity and less negativity, if for nothing else. And I think I'll go ahead and leave that on that part.
Yeah, and I mean, I got really nothing really too much left to say. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I saw that Howard Stern movie, Private Parts, when I was 9 years old, and then knew who Hugh Hefner was because I hung out with a kid that was in high school. So, because that's just how I, you know, grew up. So all of a sudden I found out about Hugh Hefner at 8 years old. So I grew up pretty quickly, you know, and it's just those role models just never changed. But it was always about entertainment for me, you know, and I think for me, taking a look at my life and sitting there saying, okay, I clearly don't want what, you know, my father's life. I don't want my mother's life. I love my parents, but I don't want the life that they're living because I want something more. I want something better. And of course, they sit there and want something better for me as well. You know, I see my dad work his entire life, 2 full-time jobs. I've seen my dad work endlessly. I've seen my mom work endlessly. Now both of them are disabled, that, you know, at pretty young ages, you know, only in their early 50s. You know, that's not ridiculously old. And they're already sitting there talking about, oh, we don't know how long we got left. And it's like, I look at that, I'm just like, you know what? I can't imagine being that age and living in a house that I don't want to live in, making car payments, making big house payments, not being truly happy, just trying to find happiness and whatever I can possibly. I want to be happy all the time. And to me, I think that's what everybody wants to do. The biggest, when you're successful, when you can wake up smiling and go to sleep smiling every single day. That's when you know you've become successful. And I've gotten to the point where right now I can wake up smiling and still not yet at that point where I can go to sleep smiling, just because I'm worried about, okay, I got a lot of work to do to continue to progress and make this happen for my brand and everything. But at least I got that first half down. And I think that's what a lot of people, they just want to be happy. And that's the biggest thing. And I believe it comes down to identity. I think unless you know who you are, you can never truly be happy, because you're just being happy for somebody else, or being happy uh, as essentially a person that's has a mask on. You're not really you. So that's why a lot all of this has been about identity, and all this is connected for sure.
And I want to go into like continuing on this topic of happiness, and I I'll be talking about my past, but I won't be talking about school or identity. I'll be talking about games because we haven't talked much about this, and one thing us three have a lot in common is games. And I've been, talking a fair bit about when I was depressed, and at the time I do try to so-called escape through games, and and sometimes, when I look back, I kind of wonder what made games so much fun. Like why do I want to do it, and why does it seem to give me happiness even though it's short term? Like, I mean, it's different from playing. Like, playing is different from recording and making a video and then showing others and then seeing comments. That's like two different things. Like, just playing by myself, having no one to show it. I might feel happy at the time, but maybe an hour, 2 hours after I'm done, I'm back to my old self. But when I record, it feels like a sense of accomplishment. Like if I get a few views, a few likes, and a few comments, I feel like I accomplished something with that video. Yes, the video might not be perfect, but here I am gaming, sharing, and meeting new people. And at the time when I was depressed, I go to games. I think partly because of how in games, if you fail something, you could just restart, or you could go back to your save file or checkpoint, whatever it is, and try again. That's something we don't have in real life, and and I think that and I think that's kind of alluring to me at the time, because I'm like, okay, so here I made a mistake. Yes, I didn't pass it, but I'll reload that save. I'll do it again, and this second time I'm gonna breeze through it, pass it, get a really great score, and I'll move on to the next level. And it. And in addition, in games I could be people I cannot be. I mean, I can't seem like, for example, let's say I play Counter Strike. Back then and even now, I don't see myself ever wielding a weapon and trying to, wielding a weapon and trying to shoot people. I can't see myself doing that. But like violence, like people say violence is bad, but I feel like violence online can really help you in that you're venting out your frustration without actually hurting anyone. Like everybody playing Counter Strike, they know you're trying to kill each other. Like there's no hatred. It's not like I hate you, I'm gonna kill you. It's more like, okay, the objective is to kill each other, do whatever objective the game has, and that's also why I like games. Like first, if I make a mistake, I could go back, fix it, and do better. And secondly, I could do things I could never see myself actually doing, and some of it feels great because it lets me vent out in a way I couldn't do in real life. In elementary school, I have gotten into fights. And yes, it does help vent out my frustration, but it did get me in trouble. So like on games, if in Counter Strike, if I shoot someone, I kill them. I mean, unless I'm a terrible player, otherwise people aren't gonna say anything because it's part of the game. And and I want to continue a bit longer because my last bit was kind of short. Basically, like I was saying how I didn't want to make mistakes, and that's part of the thing about life. Like people don't want to make mistakes, so they stay in their comfort zone. They do what they think is safe because they don't want to make the mistakes. Because unfortunately, people get punished for mistakes, and and mistakes is how people learn. And when I say people are punishing mistakes, like unfortunately, we'll have to go back to school. But school is really obvious. You make a mistake on an exam, you lose marks. And people get into this mentality that if I make mistakes in life, I'm gonna fail. But mistakes and failure are something you will need going forward because a lot of things in life didn't just happen. They happened because someone kept trying. I mean, let's say a physicist trying to coming up with a theory, but they have to start with like a hypothesis, and then they have to eventually prove it. They probably will encounter a lot of mistakes along the way. Like even Einstein, he probably made some mistakes along the way, but eventually he found things that other people couldn't deny. Like they do experiments and they're like, wow, Einstein's right. This is indeed the case. And that's what needs to happen in life. You have to be you have to be willing to make mistakes. And that's kind of why I'm glad that in real life, unlike games, we don't have a save, we don't have a checkpoint. Because this bit of uncertainty, yes, you might make mistakes, you might do things you regret, but that also means that you your future is uncertain. The fact that your future is uncertain means that it hasn't been written out yet. And who better to write out your own future than yourself? If it's uncertain, you write it out yourself. You use your own action, use your own, imagination, all of that. You write out your own future. That's why it's unwritten because it's waiting for you to get there and write it out. And if it's already determined, then life isn't really worth. I mean, like in games, that the endings, even if there's multiple endings, it's pretty much determined if you walk through this path, this path, this path. But in life, would you like that? Would you like to know that if you go here, 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 you'll have this ending, and you'll know when you'll die? It's not much of a life if you know what's gonna happen every single day because then everything's scripted and you feel like you don't have freedom. And from my experience, a lot of people generally like their freedom. On to you, Aurian.
All right, so first of all, back with Rogue, I agree completely on the everyday smiles. That is when you know you've made it, or if not at least made it, that's at least when you know that you're at a good point. You're at a good place. You don't have to be succeeding at what you want. I mean, as long as your life, and I think that's what we're all aspiring to, is just to be able to wake up with a smile, go to bed with a smile. Might have some junk in between that might not be so great, but at the end of the day, if you can go to bed the way you woke up, then I think that's a victory. And also, I'd like to talking about how he's saying he's trying to get a show and brand everything going. Nice little poke to go watch the first episode as if much as needed. I haven't watched it yet myself because I've been really busy today. I am going to watch it sometime tonight. But congratulations on what you have accomplished so far with that first episode. Last I checked, I didn't know how many views it had, but I know it had like 11 upvotes, like 3 shares. So people are looking like they're really enjoying it, and I'm happy that is happening because even from your small trailer that you did yesterday, where this was going to be the original intro, that looked amazing. So I can only imagine how amazing the actual first episode is going to be here tonight. As for amateur, I'm not going to go too much into the gaming aspect, not here on the podcast, because, my God, I could go on for days. Like, this podcast would be like 72-hour plus. But what I will say is that gaming is an amazing outlet. I know a lot of people will give it crap saying it causes violence and whatnot, and I think studies have proven that they really don't, that it actually does help take off stress. But I'm not going to sit there and knock people who think it does cause it. If you do, that's cool. For me, gaming is an amazing outlet, an amazing source. It's like an interactive book or an interactive movie. Not only do you get to, well, especially if you go to Metal Gear, my God, Metal Gear Solid 4. Take a few steps, 40-minute movie! But seriously though, I mean, it's still like an interactive movie or an interactive book. And honestly, that's what actually got me into loving to read, was a lot of teachers were like, how are you so advanced with your reading? I played video games. Like, they have reading. It's like the games I do. And they were like Final Fantasies. There was a lot of text. They didn't talk back then. I think my favorite experience, which is where I'll leave it with the gaming topic part at least, my favorite experience was about 7th, 8th grade. We were in science class, and we had this pre-test thing on mitochondria or mitio, something around there. And the teacher said that if anybody can pass it, 100%, we will not have to go through it. You know, unlucky for him that at the time PlayStation had brought a game out with Squaresoft, I think they still were back then, called Parasite Eve. I played that game like 4 or 5 times, and I was still playing it again. And I not only aced it, but I put more into it than what the book even had at the time. So, I mean, gaming can be a great learning experience, too. And the teacher ended up going, well, somebody did pass it, but I was kind of joking. I didn't expect anybody to get 100%. I ended up helping to teach that section of the course. And he asked me what it was, and I told him it was games. So I ended up letting him borrow my PlayStation and my Parasite Eve, because I had other systems back then. He never gave it back. Speaking of which, if you still have my system and you're listening, I wouldn't mind getting it back. No, you're fine. At this point, you can keep it, because I have bought another one long, long ago. Plus, I got PS4, but he loved it. It got him into gaming. Like, he would sit down and start talking to me about some good games, because I had good choices for it. But the important thing is that anybody out there that wants to chat it up with me on games can always check out my VidMe, my YouTube. You don't have to watch my videos. You can just message me. Let it be like Twitter, Facebook, just with videos that nobody watches. I mean, it'd be nice if you did watch it, but I don't care. I would just chat with you guys all day about gaming. So, and I think I might actually bring gaming up once more, but I guess so. I guess I put a lot on gaming crap, and I thought I was going to leave it at that. Well, I'll try to make these even shorter. Amateur put it into the fact of he couldn't see himself killing people or doing the war thing. I think for me, and this comes back to the role model, which is being yourself, all comes back around, as Rogue put it. I think it was more the heroics of what you were doing in that game, not necessarily the actions. You were trying to save the world. You were trying to save the princess. That's where I felt myself, was that I wanted to change the world or do something, or at least what happened in the games were heroic. And then as a kind of, I know what Amateur said was serious, but a little joke aside too, that God, how I wish there could be checkpoints sometimes, because goodness knows there's some things I would love to redo in life. But that being said, I still really love what you said, the whole topic. I love the fact that you said that the checkpoints would hurt us, you know, that the life experience helps mold us, shape us, make us into who we are. And I fully and 100% agree with that. And I think that, as we've come back to many times, our past helps mold us for the future. And again, I wouldn't want anything different, including checkpoints. I love games, I love checkpoints, but sometimes that life experience, even though you could redo it over and over again, would just be better to have learned and be able to come up with other solutions to it in your mind.
Yeah. So the first thing, thank you for the compliments. Appreciate it, man. And yeah, one of the things that kind of makes it sound like almost like a matrixy type feel. That's kind of what I was thinking when Amateur was talking about this. Was it, not what really. I wouldn't want to know what's going to happen tomorrow because if I knew exactly how every single second, every single day of my life is planned out till the day I die, that would suck. And it would suck even more if somebody told me, and now you can't do anything about it. This is how it is. You know, that's kind of like a matrixy type feel that we have no control. We're just living, basically being controlled by something greater than us. And I always hated that. But yeah, for me it's just I don't know, I enjoy just seeing what the day brings every single day. I sit there and will go on the computer, sit there and check out what's going on with my channel, and then go from there and just see what happens, and take day as it goes, and making sure that I'm just not idolized and I'm not doing nothing, because to me that's probably when I get the most depressed, is when I do nothing. I just sit around and am not very active. I find a lot of the times now, I used to game like crazy. Like I literally could sit there and finish a 40-hour game in, a 2.5, 3 day span and be good with it. Like I finished Kingdom Hearts 2 when it came out on PS2. I got that game done in 2.5 days. And I was just addicted to video games. I couldn't stop playing it, but I was also depressed at the same time because that was all my life was video games, and nothing really, as great as video games are and as great as, escape as they can be, it also can take away from the reality of life. You know, I feel like anything in moderation, is perfectly fine. But when you become addicted to it or you overdo it, that's when it starts to mess up the world around you, your life. It messes up relationships and everything. Um, and I know with like even like I know you brought up Metal Gear Solid 4, so I'm just gonna quick talk about Metal Gear Solid 4. And to me, Metal Gear Solid 4 is when Metal Gear Solid 5 came out, I was disappointed. I'm not gonna lie. I Metal Gear Solid 5 to me is the worst Metal Gear game out of all of them. I can't stand it. The reason I love Metal Gear Solid 4 is because it had a story, and that's something I've always been in love with the Metal Gear series. So, Metal Gear Solid 4 almost had me in tears by the end of the game. I'll just say that. I know some people say that about Final Fantasy 7. Metal Gear Solid 4 is my Final Fantasy 7. So, but yeah, that's just really, I just didn't have too much. I just wanted to talk about, kind of just that's really all I got.
Okay, that's great. And I think this is probably a good place for us to end this podcast. I really appreciate all the people who were watching and two people who actually commented in chat, Malik Monk and Glam. I know Glam. I met him before in one of the Discord servers, so he's a good friend, and I'm glad he could drop by briefly. And definitely, if you could, catch our stream, definitely come. We'll try to chat with you as much as possible. I know we're still learning and we still have our occasional technical problems. Like first day is Aurian, today apparently me. Hopefully it's not that bad on my end. I'm just hoping it improves. But yeah, we're still learning, we're still improving, and of course, all of our equipment can improve. That's for sure. But that's a steady growth, and that's sort of the thing. Like we are enjoying every minute of what we're doing here, even though we might not have the best equipment, we not make the best content as we think we have. Like I'm sure the three of us believe we have a lot more potential. We could bring a lot to the table. We just need to figure out the best way to approach these issues, because these are serious issues. They're not always easy to talk about, and 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 maybe later on we might even get emotional if we touch certain points because you know we are talking about our own lives and it can't get personal. So I'll first let Aurian and Rogue do their conclusion to this podcast, and I'll just end this podcast with my own little conclusion. So up to you, Aurian.
All right, so yeah, finishing up, I just want to comment first quickly up to Rogue about Metal Gear. And yeah, I know a lot of people were disappointed with 5. I think a big part of that too just has to do with the falling out that both Kojima and Konami had. Not just that, but just the fact that it's sad that in this day and age, even after their little falling out, that Kojima couldn't get the rights to his own game. Like, Konami owns it. He can't sit there and do a Metal Gear now. And it's sad that he can't. And I think that was one of the things they did was either he did it or they did it. They purposely messed up Metal Gear Solid 5. Not to mention now they're planning to do a zombie game for Metal Gear, and I honestly think that is leading to the. I think maybe they think it's going to succeed, and it could because zombies are popular right now. But in the long run, I think they're doing it just to mess up the franchise. Fans aren't going to care. They're just going to be like, 4 was it. 4 was the last one. 4 was where he actually was able to do what he could and wasn't being bullied or bullying back at Konami. So, I mean, that's my thoughts on the Metal Gear one. As a closing statement, I would like to say that at the end of the day, what I've learned from this whole podcast, at the end of the day, it's positivity that helps get us through this. It's doing what you love to do. And if you wonder why I'm always so ecstatic, even when we're talking about serious subjects, it's because of the fact that you know, somebody's going to watch this, and I appreciate it. I know Amateur does. I'm sure Rogue does. And for me, my shows, even as horrible as it can go, with me losing and failing miserably, when I win, I feel good because it makes you guys get to see never giving up attitude, and positivity helps keep the world flowing. So what I think I'm trying to say is that if we can keep a more positive attitude, positive role models, and look back at the past as more of a guideline and how to deal with things, then I think we all might be better off. And again, like we always say, we're not professionals, so maybe not 100% take it to heart. But if you can get something out of this whole podcast or just what I said, then go for it. Because we're all here together as the human race. We're here to help one another. Whether that just be emotionally, physically as best that we can, we're not going to just ignore the problem like we sometimes do. We're, at least I hope that we're sitting there trying to make a difference, and I hope that you guys, if nothing else, are enjoying a nice little sit-down workout, whatever you guys are doing with this podcast, driving, whatnot. I just hope that you guys can really get something from each and every episode as we continue to evolve. Will this be the same podcast? Who knows? Only time will tell what we evolve into, but I'm hoping we at least keep some basis of, as Rogue always wants, to entertain you guys, whether out of an emotionally down state or just enjoying life as it is. But I'll go ahead and leave it there. So, as always, Aurian MoonRose signing out.
All right. Well, yeah. So basically, the only thing I want to add into my closing statement is the most important thing to do in life is to figure out who you are. And sometimes, and I will tell you right now, it takes being alone to figure out who you truly are. If you're trying to figure out exactly the type of person you want to be or who you think you are, if you believe you can do it by hanging out with your family, your friends, or your peers or whatever, I don't know. I find it doesn't work. I find the best way to figure out exactly what you want to do in your life, who you truly want to be in life, is reflecting and doing self-reflection and understanding, you know what? I know who I am. I'm not going to try to pretend to be somebody else just to fit in with somebody. If they don't like who I am, then tough. Then I find people who actually do. I think that's the most important thing, because at the end of the day, if you're living a life basically as almost a Loki type character, where you're constantly putting on a different mask just to fit in with whatever group that you sit there and come in contact with, you're never going to be truly happy. Because at the end of the night, you're going to have to take that mask off, realize who you are, and realize, can I really trust that these people actually like me for me, because I'm trying to be like them? So that's really, to me, the most important thing. And anybody who wants to check out, I just uploaded the very first episode. It's going to be a 13 episode season of the Rogue Edge show. But basically, what I did was create a television show on VidMe, and it's never been done before on YouTube. It's never been done before on VidMe. And if you find somebody that did it, then send me a link, because I essentially did something that you would see on Comedy Central or Cartoon Network. So if you want to check it out, if you want a good laugh, if you want to sit there and entertain yourself, feeling like you're having a down day, definitely check out my channel. Check out the first episode of the Rogue Edge show. Promise you won't be disappointed. It's a lot of people are upvoting it, a lot of people are sharing it, a lot of people are liking it. So it's definitely something to be entertained by. And that's all I got.
Alright, thanks, Aurian and Rogue. And basically, thank you to everyone who came to Twitch or watching this on YouTube or VidMe. I have the links to the channels of Aurian and Rogue in the description so that you can find them, and definitely check them out. I mean, as you can see from the podcast, they're great people, so you definitely want to, check them out. And if you love their content, support them. Like, even a comment or a like or upvote, all of those help, and basically tell them, and me included. I mean, if you want to check my content, sure. Like, these really help because it tells us that we're doing something right, and people are liking what we make. And yeah, thank you for all your support. It's just amazing how many people we've met. I mean, for our first podcast, we got some great comments. Basically, we're meeting more people, and people are talking. So it's definitely a great experience meeting new people, and I'm hoping that we'll get another member of our podcast on for the next podcast. I can't make any promises because with real life and time zones and all of that, it's not always easy, but hopefully we'll get something figured out, and hopefully we'll bring in some more perspective, and ideally we won't run out of topics at one point in this podcast. And we're still learning, we're still improving, and any feedback would be appreciated. If you have anything you want to say, and the fact that you reached this far, I I'm really grateful. Just leave in the comments or even message any of us. We'll gladly reply. So thank you everyone for coming to the DWAAN Podcast, and I hope you have a good one. Bye.